Alright guys, HyDra again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. There's no doubt that this brand new Modern Warfare 3 title is far more promising to many pro players that have recently retired than the games that effectively forced them to retire. Methodz is talking about grinding challenges when the new game launches, and he wants ideally Scump to come along and grind with him as well and return to some form of competition. Scump though does not seem so keen, mainly because he believes that if he ever loses in challenges, and that goes on his CODGamepedia record, then certain fans would be roasting him pretty hard to such an extent that he doesn't really even want to give it a go. Should he change his mind on this? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Lots to get into here. Firstly, if you guys are familiar with, well, what the Mafia have been doing over the last few days, loads of subscriber 8 stuff like this. There's a subscriber challenge that Parasite and Zuma are doing together. I think if you're sub to both of them, then there's a player draft and there's a tournament coming up in a few days time. So this is pretty cool. Captains and times announced soon. So if you guys are looking to get involved in that, then feel free to do so. Also, just a quick thing to note, I always like looking at Drazah streets to see who was grinding the most, because some pros, they'll be like, alright, whatever, I'll call it a day until the new game launches. Some pros are on the grind all the time, and I think Slash's been in here a lot. Even Shotzzy was actually playing in these respawn nights. I'm guessing these were Cold War again. Gwyn's spinning a load of these. Drazah, of course, is always there. Capsidal, Arcetes, and then Prolude and Sparge rounded out this one. There were other players. I know that Temp was getting involved in it as well. So, you know, pretty interesting to keep your eyes on that one. Also, a bit of drama on the level of European and, let's say, outside of North American talent in the league. And I don't know what you guys think about this, because there's two sides of the discussion on the actual number of players, but then how that compares to the level of opportunity. So as Jake Hell says, not including Heretics going all Spanish, there are currently only 8 non-NA players on starting CDL rosters going into next season, despite top EU teams consistently making gains on NA competition. Can't help but feel like non-NA talent is just being phased out. Now, I'm not sure I necessarily agree with this, and firstly, I think you kind of have to include Heretics going all Spanish, because that is, you know, part of the reason why. I think, frankly, we're looking at some of these UK players, the likes of Nasty, the likes of Vance, the likes of Hixie, that aren't getting CDL spots, and even Vortex, for example, and that is really tough for those players. Does the opportunity, like, is that a fact of the opportunities not existing for those players, or is being like a kind of middle-of-the-road UK player simply not enough? So I think probably both sides have some merit here, but as EasyMax says, he puts this together, 37 players so far, 14 of them are from outside the USA and Canada. So 14 from EU, APAC, of course, we're looking at the Spanish guys, also the likes of Cammy and Afro and those guys, and, you know, now on Los Angeles Thieves, of course, CleanX on Toronto, Insight as well, and then Snoopy from Mexico, then you've got HyDra, then you've got Pred, and it totals up at 14 players, which is 38% right now outside of the US and Canada. If you look at the last few years, there's, you know, this is the most we've had by quite some margin. The most, okay, obviously the Heretics thing if you want to exclude it or not, but regardless, this is pretty much the most World League we have actually had probably since the World League, to be honest, really, since it actually was the Call of Duty World League pre kind of 2019 and before that. So, you know, there definitely are opportunities for players outside of the US and Canada. The difficulty is that it is challenging to actually get spots. The fact that there's no London team anymore, the fact that there's no Paris team, that definitely doesn't help. And when you look at visas and stuff, that's a challenge. So, you know, which side are you on this? Are you on the side of actually there are opportunities for these players on teams if you're good enough, and the players that aren't getting opportunities just aren't good enough anymore? Or is there a part, because I definitely think there is some part, and there always will be, that if you're a UK player or you're from another country, it's more difficult to sign you than it is to get a player locally. And, you know, that is always going to be a factor. But if you're a simply undeniable talent like Pred or like HyDra, for example, then it doesn't matter. And they're going to find a way to get you anyway. But in general, I'm pretty satisfied with what's happened on this over the last couple of years. Now, let's talk about players that either have retired or may potentially retire very shortly. We saw yesterday that Clayster said this is probably his last year. Not because he doesn't like competing, but he's just fed up of going through the, let's say, the musical chairs of the off-season, especially when he's not getting signed immediately to a team, as he says here. If I said that if I had to find a new org and stuff, I'm not doing it, so nothing is set in stone yet. But let's be honest, okay, who knows? Maybe he does really well for Carolina, and then Carolina say, right, Clay, we want to keep you on next year into the tryout game, because I'm sure part of Clay wants to probably play the tryout game next year. It would be a bit of a bummer to retire before the tryout title comes out. Maybe he doesn't think like that. I would think like that, but maybe I'm biased a little bit towards tryout, so Clay doesn't say it's impossible, and who knows, right? Maybe mid-season some other organization comes along, picks up Clay, and then they keep him on. So definitely possible, but you know, more likely than not, I would say Clay is probably going to call it a day. The fire's still there. It's the off-season headache that I am tired of. Now, Scump called it a day most recently. We talked about the comparisons between Clay's potential retirement, Scump's retirement that we saw several months ago, but Scump has been talking about returning to competitive. He said outright that he was 90% sure he wanted to return and actually play for OpTic this season instead of, I think it would have been Kenny's role or Drazah's role on the flex position that Scump could have come back into. He wasn't fully sure he wanted to do it, therefore he didn't, but I do wonder if he'd have had the chance to play Modern Warfare 3 and then make that decision, he might have made a different decision, because he definitely seems to have a very good time on the beta of this game, and there's been lots of talk as to whether Scump could make some sort of, you know, Jordan-esque return. Even Dashy mentioned this possibility at some point. Maybe not this year, maybe it could be another year. Scump's definitely still got the ability. Whether he's got the fire, that's another question. But he could play some form of competition this season. We know that Methodz and aBeZy and maybe Octane and others are keen to play, mainly for content really, the Challengers matches, right? Play some Challenger tournaments, scrim a little bit as a team. That is going to be phenomenal content. And Methodz is trying to get Scump to play a little bit of this. But Scump doesn't seem so keen, and, well, these are the reasons why.
Playing this game, like, you can just tell, because obviously we're still going to be playing it. We're going to play 8s, tournaments, wagers. Like, I'm still going to be playing it like I'm competing. Otherwise, because that's what I like to stream, and I like to compete still. It's not like, just because I retired doesn't mean I didn't...
You're not, like, playing.
Just because I doesn't mean I don't have passion for competing. You
I know
what
what you're going to do.
What?
Everybody that you play against, let's say you're playing against Thieves, or let's say you're playing against whoever's in the league right now, when you beat them, you're going to be like, oh, your manager just called me, said if I want to replace you or something.
Well, no, I mean, I do want to play challengers too. Like, I want to play as much as I can, as long as it doesn't interfere with the watch party. So like, if there's a cup, we can't play. But
can I give you an idea? What? Right? Let's say your challengers matches, right? Like, how often are they during the watch parties?
It depends. In the beginning, I can get away with it, but once the season develops, there's like no way to really do it.
No, really?
No way.
Why?
Not
because
really.
The thing about this is me, aBeZy, you, Seth. Most of the time it's just you three. Yeah. But when it's time for you, Seth, and Mark to go play, I can step in with 2 other people and then commentate y'all shits. Like, it is doable. And then as soon as you guys are off, you guys back on it, you give your own fucking, like, it can be done. And it will be sick, crowd. Like the video if you agree.
I agree. Getting Seth on board.
He's right
for
there.
something like that.
For challengers?
The problem with Seth is that you guys ask him instead of tell him.
Seth ain't playing.
No, the problem is, and to his defense, he's gonna
be like Messi playing in the MLS.
Well, no, yes, like
it's not worth it for Seth to play.
He has a different legacy to where, like,
it's not worth it.
It would piss him off if he like lost, because if we're playing top challengers and we lose, he does have a lot of morons who are like, oh my god, you're losing to challengers, and like,
thank God you retired.
Yeah, like I guess
that would piss me off.
I guess that would be kind of annoying.
Yeah,
but I tell him, I'm like, dude, what the you have to prove? Like, anybody with a brain knows what's going on.
I don't know. As much as I sit here and say that that'd be cool, I don't think if I was him, I wouldn't do it personally.
Yeah, but
so as Hex says, and as Zinni says as well, like, I can't blame Scump for thinking in this way. If I was Scump, and as Hex says as well, I'm looking at my COD Gamepedia, you know, I'm looking at my, like, all-time records, and if you're looking through, like, every tournament you've ever played from way back in the day, all the championships Scump won, the World Championship, the most recent event win, Major 1 2022, do you want to add on to that tenure with a load of, like, challenger tournaments where you don't place particularly well and lose to amateurs? Like, maybe not. Now, would it be a lot of fun? Would it be good content? Probably. Would Scump get roasted by his chat if they ever lost to a good challenger team? Probably yes. So, you know, I get it from Scump's point of view that it's probably not worth it, but nonetheless, it would be great fun. And obviously XinNii's down to do it, right? It's just a little bit different when you're Scump, I think. If you're Methodz, it's it's whatever. No one's going to hold it against you if you lose to some challenger kids. It doesn't matter. But for Scump, people will care and Scump will get roasted and people will. If Scump does it and then he doesn't do so well in challenges, I'm sure he would do very well in challenges. But the fact of the matter is, if you're not grinding like the challenger teams are grinding, you're going to get found out in terms of knowledge, even if you've got better skill on the maps, on the game. And then people will, look back at Scump's career and said, oh yeah, he came back in challenges and he lost to these kids. So I don't know. I get it from Scump's point of view, but obviously aBeZy is going to make the comeback to some degree. It's not really a comeback, it's not a competitive comeback, just playing for fun in the challenger side. But then again, I guess you could say that, well, what if you, let's say, played in challenges? Major 1 might be a Pro-Am tournament again. Like, could you imagine the scenes if Scump, aBeZy, XinNii, and I don't know who else they'd get to round out that team, but, maybe, I don't know, Nature or something. They actually do really well in challenges. They qualify for the Pro-Am event or something. They turn up to the Pro-Am. They start knocking out pro teams. Like, I think we're dreaming at this point if we think that's actually going to be happening. But, still, there are some great storylines that could happen as a result. And obviously, Scump and XinNii understand the potential for content that provides. And it does make me wonder a little bit whether there could be some sort of OpTic gaming, OpTic Nation split. This is this has got to be kind of like going into Advanced Warfare, right? Coming out of the Ghost season when there was a Crim, Formal, Scump and Nade on the OpTic gaming team. And then on the OpTic Nation team was initially Karma, TP, we got Proofy here and aBeZy. There was all sorts going, Killer was here. I think was Swanee here. So they made a few changes to that OpTic Nation roster, and Karma was definitely biding his time for when Nadeshot was dropped or retired, which he eventually did, for him to get going into the starting OpTic team. But that's what OpTic used to do back in the day. And they'd have the two, they'd have the pro team, they'd have the second team. They're kind of both pro teams. They'd both play in the tournaments, but there was an A team, there was a B team. And, maybe there's a world in which there's OpTic Texas, and then OpTic Nation, or whatever you want to say, returns. I think OpTic Nation is technically what they brand their kind of like, paid website thing as. So maybe they wouldn't use the term OpTic Nation. You guys probably remember actually during the Vanguard season, there was OpTic Texas, and there was, what do they call themselves? Texas Nation, maybe, which was like General, who was OpTic sub, with Havoc and aBeZy and Kismet, I think, was the team of 4 that were dominating challenges. And they didn't call themselves OpTic Nation because I guess they technically weren't like OpTic players, but they called themselves like Texas Nation or something because it was close enough. So maybe there's something similar to that. But if you're, if you were Scump and if you were other players in Scump's position, would you want to go and play challenges, right? There's many players that feel the same way. Crim6, for example, who was giving some interesting perspectives on Infinite Warfare apparently being the best jetpack card. Maybe part of that is because they actually won champs in that game rather than not winning champs as Advanced Warfare and Black Ops 2 was the case. I definitely think Infinite Warfare was very much underrated. I don't think it was the best jetpack COD, but even, I was just thinking about it from Crim's point of view. Would Crim think about saying, all right, let me go back to challenges and grind it out there? Because, is that going to somewhat, ruin or squander reputations? It's not going to help reputations. Like, there's nothing for Scump to prove in challenges, but also there's nothing for him to gain in challenges, really. Like, he's, it doesn't matter what he plays, he's going to be killing the content game anyway. There's no real positives to grinding out challenges for Scump, so, I get it. But as Hex said, maybe if you just tell Scump that this is what we're doing rather than asking him, then you might get a somewhat different response. And, it's the same question for some of these players, for example, Priestahh or even Slasher. Like, if Slasher was to be dropped or have to take some time away or something, it's like in Cold War. Did Slasher go to challenges? Well, I'm almost certain that he didn't, right? I think there's certain players that won't do that because they feel like it's only going to be detrimental. Like, let's say accuracy gets dropped. If he goes to challenges, is that ever going to actually help his reputation? Of course, Scump's retired. He's not trying to return, so different story. But there's certain players, especially veterans, that probably only have things to lose in challenges. I think it's the same for Methodz, actually, when he went to challenges in Cold War, because he was dropped from Boston, or actually, no, Toronto, sorry, right at the time. He was dropped from Toronto, Insight came in, Methodz went to challenges, as did TJ, I'm pretty sure, when he was off the Los Angeles Thieves. And their reputations didn't get helped from their time in challenges. Like they were playing fine, but they didn't have a particularly good time. They were losing to certain teams, and arguably not playing would have been better for them. Now, those guys were trying to get back in the Pro League. Scump isn't necessarily, so maybe it is a different story, but intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below regardless. And just one final thing here from JP Krez. He was discussing the possibility of war. Now, this was, I think, originally in, was it World at War or something like that? It was an old school game mode. It actually came back in, I think it was Advanced Warfare, as a game mode called Momentum. And the way this worked is there's 5 flags, and you start with 2, I'm pretty sure like 2 flags you get each pretty much. You have to fight for the middle one, and then once you've captured 3 of the 5 flags, you then kind of work your way forwards, and the spawns work in such a way that you have 60% of the map control, they have 40%, and then if you get to capture all of the flags, then you win the game. So, you can push the other team back, you get pushed back yourself in kind of like waves, and it's a reasonable game mode. I don't think it's a great game mode, but it's maybe one that's worthy of consideration if it's in the game, as it quite possibly might be. So quite some possibilities here, and look, it's not domination, so but it's probably not massively better than domination, to be honest. But hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.